Right, I've had the nudge, so we're going to get started if that's okay. So if I can hand over to you, I'm going to go on mute and disappear so I'm not distracting, and I'll just field questions in the chat room in the meantime. It's over to you, Anna. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Richard. Okay, so thank you everybody for joining today. Thank you for watching. So we're going to talk about data and analytics, and this talk is going to be about Google Tag Manager, 10 crucial tasks to unleash your data and improve website performance. So what we're really going to talk about, the objective here is to talk about the power of GTM. We want to understand what we can do with it and how powerful it is and get the most from it. But also, I really want to inspire you to learn about it and love GTM. So hopefully you'll be able to do that by the end of this session. So who am I? How am I authorized to speak about this? I am Anna Lewis and I run Polkadot Data. I did digital marketing for 7 or 8 years, and then I moved to analytics only. So focusing on global e-commerce implementations and yes, that side of things. Now I run my own analytics consultancy agency. And yeah, we have fun helping clients use the data better and making sure that people get the most from their data. They can understand it, they're tracking the right thing, that they've got a good implementation in place, and that when they migrate from one platform to another, then they're able to just keep their data consistent and working. So there's a lot of different things that we do, but it predominantly focuses around Google Analytics, Google Analytics and Google Tag Manager and Data Studio. That's where we are experts. So we're going to talk about unleashing the data. With Google Tag Manager, with Google Analytics, the world is your oyster. There is so much more to it than the basics that you get with a basic install or with what's in the box in Google Analytics. So we're going to talk a bit about the Google Analytics side of things, as well as the other stuff you can do with Google Tag Manager. But first of my 10 top tips, the first one is plan. I know it's boring. I know it might be, feel like admin, but don't make it boring. Make it exciting. Make it about business growth. Make it about what is going to be the most beneficial. Think about your business objectives and how you can use those to plan your strategy, your tracking, everything. So you can think about all sorts of different things that you could track. There's so much out there, but it's really important to also focus on what you're able to change. So what are you actually able to impact? What can you do to make a difference to your business? So earlier this year, I saw a great presentation by Yehuda at Super Week. And one of the things that really struck with me was how to think in circles is the way that they called it. But the key thing is to not just ask one question. Think about the business decisions, then think about how you can optimize that, and then look at what you do for tracking. So you make sure that your questions don't just say, which marketing methods are people using to get to my site? So that's just one thing about the user. But think about how it overlaps. So which marketing methods are used to get to my site by returning users? And so add it in, add some depth, or on mobile and things like that. So you've got the 3 areas, the user, the product, and the platform. And you can think about multiple questions there. And that gives you so much more opportunity to go deeper and expand further and get to some much better insights for your business that are going to be much more successful. So this is how you can then plan it. You've got your business questions, you put those on the left-hand side, and then you look at what that means, what KPI that is, what tracking. So you take all your business questions and what you want to look at, your objectives, what you can change, brainstorm, have some fun with it. Sit down, take an hour, just go mad with Post-it notes on the wall, whatever you want to. Get all your planning done, understand that. And then once you've got all the ideas generated, you can pop it into a plan to work out your priorities. And this is their example of a plan. So you can see that they're looking at how many times a user visits during a 7-day trial, for example, and then which metrics you need, whether you need anything custom. And then you can use that to frame your plan. So yeah, that's one of the things that I really liked about this presentation was the extra level that it went to. We've done measurement plans over and over and over, but to really make sure that they take the objectives and then you combine it with at least 2 of those circles. So secondly, you've got your plan, but how do you match it all together? You've got your website on one side, you've got Google Tag Manager on the other side. Now, that piece in the middle is the data layer. And this is really important, and I would recommend that you always use a data layer with Google Tag Manager. It's ridiculously useful and important, and it can help you in so many ways. So the key thing, before we even see any screenshots of Google Tag Manager, we're going to be looking at the data layer. So the data layer is a piece of code that goes on your website, and it might look a bit like this. So it's just organized information. It's like schema, it's like all of these things that just make it easier to send that data accurately and easily. So this is an example of our product data layer for a Google Analytics enhanced e-commerce implementation. The key thing here, you really probably only need to include the name, but ideally you would have the ID, the name, the price, and the category. If you've got brand and variant, that's brilliant. If you've got additional category information, that's fantastic too. And then the additional price information if you want it. But the key thing is organize this data nicely. For different things, you want to organize it in different ways. So check that out. But make sure that you have a beautiful data layer. So it comes in the middle of it. So you've got your measurement plan, you've got your data layer plan. From your data layer plan, you make the tag plan and you work out what goes together. And then you can look at your reports and insights, which obviously you planned at the beginning, but now you can just check you're getting all the data for them. So this data layer plan, if we talk about that, you can put that piece of code on site, or you can put it in custom JavaScript in Google Tag Manager. So you don't have to use developers and you don't have to do that resource. But what we also can do is combine it. So we can look at the on-site stuff, the custom JavaScript stuff, or both. Okay, thirdly, and what I should probably say, I should have said this at the beginning, sorry, is that there's so much to Google Tag Manager that I'm covering things from the basics all the way through to some more advanced stuff. So some of you might not understand the end of it, and some of you might feel the beginning is too easy. So just pick a level, take what you can, get inspired or get reinvigorated to do this if you already know about it. There's so many things you could do on so many different levels with Google Tag Manager. So one of my favorite things to do with Google Tag Manager is make sure that you can implement a really good e-commerce tracking. And we normally do this with Google Analytics Enhanced E-commerce. And the way that this benefits you as a business is that you can have a look at the marketing channels that people are looking at, but then don't add to cart. So you're looking at a product and don't add to cart, you can see that drop out. You can look at adding to cart, not purchasing by device. You can look at dropout points. You can look at money that you're spending with high returns. So which marketing is actually costing you more than you think it is. We can have a look at whether or not there's checkout issues by specific countries. So that funnel report that you might have used in the past in the goals, suddenly beautiful and amazing and really useful because you can segment it. We can also look at, can you make more money, basically? What money would you make if you increase or changed on this point or that point or this point in the journey? So it's really beneficial to look at the full detail. So you get the product data all the way from impressions of the product on the list pages, through to the detail, through to the add to cart, the checkout steps, and the purchase. That makes it really, really useful and so much better than just tracking purchase. There's so much more information that you could get. And I'm surprised to see that people still aren't implementing this as default every time. So that's why I'm still harping on about it. I can't remember whether it was how many years ago it was, maybe 5 or 6 years ago I first spoke about enhanced e-commerce when it launched. And I'm still harping on about it because people still aren't using it. So it's really, really useful to implement this really well. And what you can do in Google Tag Manager is you tick a box to say use enhanced e-commerce. You tick your settings in Google Analytics, and you also use a data layer. Now, there's the box in GTM, And here's a data layer specification for a purchase. So this is just a purchase example, but as I've said, there's multiple steps that you can track. So you saw the detail example earlier, can have a look at that and understand. So that will track your product views. You can do a similar one on product impressions. Then there's one for add to cart, one for remove. And you'll see, I haven't actually put it in here, but you can push an event that says event is purchased, and you use those events, those data layer events, as your triggers for your tags. But by having all of this information in the data layer in a really easy to read fashion, it actually gives you the ability to take it and put it straight into your tags. You can then create variables for each of these things. And also this format here that I've got, that I'm showing you, that's the standard Google Analytics implementation guideline format. So that means it can just read it out of the box. If you have this information in a different kind of data layer, if you have it in a different order, if you don't have the word purchase and products and you don't have it built like this, you can use Google Tag Manager to reconfigure your data layer. And so you set up a custom JavaScript in Google Tag Manager, and you find each of the variables from your existing data layer and you remap it into the correct format for this. And it just makes it easy to go and grab what variables, this information, that information, and pop that wherever you want it in Google Analytics. So here are some of the enhanced e-commerce reports. I'm not going to go too much into depth about this, even though I can talk about it for about an hour. I won't. So there's loads of benefits. As you can see, there's a nice funnel here. There's the nice dropout. There's the dropout rates going on here. And you've also got, this is a table of data for your funnel. In this one, in this example, it's just the checkout one. But you can see here, you've got the ability to segment it. So this isn't available in goal reports. This isn't available in the old funnel reports. You can even put advanced segments on this as well and have a look at this data by advanced segments such as country, device, marketing method, were they interested in shoes versus clothes? And you can use this drop down as well to really break that data down in different ways. So it just takes your e-commerce to the next level and is nice and smooth and really enjoyable to implement through Google Tag Manager. Promise. So the next one, to take your data to the next level, custom dimensions and metrics. So again, Google Analytics out of the box, it's good, but it doesn't suit your business perfectly. Every business is different. There's millions of companies using Google Analytics. They're not all the same. They don't all have the same KPIs. They don't all have the same structure. So custom dimensions and metrics are one of the ways you can make Google Analytics work for your business. So Google Tag Manager allows you to implement this quite simply. You do a variable here, and that can be found from your data layer, or it could be something you've set, or it could be something that's pulled from a different area, so a custom JavaScript data layer that you might have for some other information. And you just pop it in against the correct reference and the index number, and say custom dimension 1 is page type. And I've got a lookup table that says if the URL contains product, the page type is product. And so you can build those as lookup tables. You can have all sorts of different variables, and you just plop this list of custom dimensions into your Google Analytics settings tag. And ideally, you would do it in the settings tag as opposed to doing it in each of the tags individually by overwriting the settings. So just do it once, and then it will apply to all of your hits that use this settings variable. So that's nice and easy. We've got to think now, it's your business, it's your data. What are you going to do? So there's 4 different ways to think about it. And you can start with your business objectives and then work out what scope you use later, or you can think about it at scope level and then match it to what you need to achieve. So the 4 scope levels are hit, product, session, and user. And this means that that piece of information can be sent at that point. So if it's a hit scope, it is sent on the hit. If you put it on every hit, then with every hit, you will get something sent to that custom dimension field. If it's product level, it goes with the product. If it's session level, it's that one, and that one is sent with the session. If it's user level, that is set to a user state, and that is sent with the session. There's a user group custom dimensional metric. So I'll go through some examples for each of these in case there's new ideas that you're not already using and things that you'd like to do. So hit level, we've got quite a lot of examples. The key things are that are really beneficial to do. We've got hit timestamp, session ID, client ID, user ID, and GTM and version. These ones are ones that I would always implement, especially the top three. Like hit timestamp is really useful because you can use it for debugging, but also you can then take it to the next level and do business intelligence work with it. You can put it into the database, you can use it in BigQuery, and you can get a lot more. So you can put your session data together better, you can do more in-depth customer journey analysis and things like that by having that one piece of information. Then we've got session ID. So again, that's useful because it might be handy to stitch sessions together and things like that, or to at least understand how many sessions there were. And also just as a reference in your SQL tables, if you get it into a database, and you can then cross-reference and group them and count unique session IDs, things like that. That's useful. Likewise, client ID. And then user ID, if you can pull that from your membership sort of area, pull it from the back end and send it in, because that then allows you to take all of this database of data and join it to your customer database. Obviously, assuming you're doing it all properly and with permission, etc. GTM ID and version is really useful for when you're debugging and you suddenly realize, oh, they've got a different Google Tag Manager account here, or they've got a different version to what I should be looking at. So sending that's useful. You can even send the tag name, and that could be useful as well, because that really just makes it so fast with debugging. You can say, oh, okay, I've got this piece of this event. How's that happening? Get your event name, go straight to GTM, you know what to fix. And that's really useful when you've got some of those bigger, more complex implementations as well. Payload length is really useful for understanding because there is a limit to it. And so, for example, enhanced e-commerce impression lists can be huge. So you want to be careful there and make sure that you're checking on the length. Tab type, tabs open, tabs ID. So that's all about whether or not the session is actually active, whether the user is even in the tab that is being recorded and sending you a session. Are they even there? Are they actually open in your tab? Page type, product type, category, they're really useful for content groupings or putting in just understanding how customers act and your customer journey and doing that analysis. So then we've got dimensions and metrics for products. So these are just standard things, but metrics you might not have considered, maybe RRP, discount value impressions. Just be careful how many times you're sending each of those or where, in case you end up with way inflated metrics, but they can be really useful as well. We've got session level ones, device, weather, time of day, a type of session. Full referrer is really useful, and although you might want to do that here, you may not. And payment method, things like that. User level examples, again, user ID, membership level, that sort of thing. So how valuable is this user to me is really useful. And you can use it for recency, frequency, monetary values, so your segments. You could use it for personalization segments, etc. So think about what's going to make a difference to your business, answer those business questions, and is there any of this data as well that you might not need it now, but you could just write yourself a postcard to your future self and put this data on. Okay, next is events. I'm sorry I'm speaking so fast, but there's a lot of content to pack in. So events are used for tracking user experience, tracking engagement. Again, we're understanding the customer journey. We're understanding the good, and that's the common one that most people do, but do we understand the bad as well? So what I want to think about is, yes, we're looking at all of these. We're looking at the engagement of the menus, sort of tertiary KPIs. Then we're looking at the secondary KPIs, the micro conversions, where you've got the clicks, the add to carts, the downloads, the forms, and then you've got your big conversions. So your macro conversions with your purchases and your leads and your contacts and things like that. But are you tracking the bad? What about, we're tracking, right, engaging with an image increases conversion rate by this, but what happens when there's no images and somebody's viewed the page? What impact does that have? When forms have errors, what impact does that have? When add to cart doesn't work because you haven't selected your variant, or when there's errors on these sorts of things, JavaScript errors, that sort of thing. If you're not tracking those, and they're quite easy to implement in Google Tag Manager generally. So that's some really useful data that you could get from GTM and GA that would really help you understand how many conversion blockers will a user see before they leave and before they give up? How determined are they to succeed? How determined are they to purchase? Okay, it's a search conference, so we've got to include something for search. So one of the things I love doing is dynamic schema. What you can do is you can take a huge spreadsheet of opening times with, half-term dates, Easter holiday times. You've got a huge list of all your different stores that might have different opening times at each of these different things, different bank holiday opening times, and you can build that in a way that you can import into Google Tag Manager, and you can then build your dynamic schema from that. So you can really save a lot of development time. You can also be so much more agile, because if they suddenly change their dates or their times, or they suddenly want to reopen because they're now allowed to, for example, it'll be much quicker to implement that sort of thing. So you can be more agile and save lots of time. You can also do canonical tags in GTM, so reference the page or do different ones. You can utilize the data layer in these. Again, you're saving developer resource. You can be more agile and faster. Likewise, meta. If it's taking ages to get the developers to do it, you can help. You can do this. And again, utilize the data layer. Once you're in the habit of this, it's going to become second nature if you're not already doing it. And for those who are already doing all of this, we're going to take this to the next level now. So custom task is something that not every implementation might be utilizing already, but it should be. So what is custom task? In my words, it's the psychologist to your data. It fixes the issues that you didn't know you had, and it provides a lot of extra support. It also can keep you legal and safe, and it helps you become the best that you can. So I think that one custom task thing can do so many things. That's why I'm going to go through some of the ideas that we've got behind what can be done, some which are essential, some which might be useful at times, and others which you might not need, but it's good to know that they're there just in case you do. So what happens when the Google Analytics script loads? There's not many people who could probably list off everything that happens and what makes what, why everything is sent to GA and at what point, but here's the list. So it starts with custom task, then we've got preview task, we've got check protocol, so that stops it loading on local servers. We've got validation, history import check, sampler, we've got build hit task and send. So that's where it builds the hit. So it's already gone through custom task before it builds the hit. So custom task is the shining star. It starts first. You can do all sorts of things here that then get passed on, and the benefit is reaped through the rest of your tags. So it is used to manipulate the model object before it's processed by the other tasks. So that means you can manipulate what is going to be included in that hit. So let's start with the legal stuff, because that's pretty important. What can you do with custom task to make sure that you're staying legal? So one of the key things, you're not allowed to collect personally identifiable information into Google Analytics. That's against their terms of service. You also shouldn't be doing it for GDPR and all sorts of reasons, and it's just not. So you can use custom task to remove that. You want to look on your website for what might trigger any personal information to potentially be collected. So anything with an email address, anything that's got name near it, anything that might be related to people's information. And you put that into a lookup. So you put your regex in, and then you have this piece of code in your custom task. And this looks for anything that might have the name information, and then it takes that information away. So you can see here it says redacted. So that will find PII and it will replace it with the words redacted. You don't need to understand this code. I'll tell you where to find it later. So the next one is that you could be using custom task to make sure that you are adhering to Google Analytics cookie opt-outs. So just a little bit here, if the cookie, if they've selected opt-out, then we need to send the, we need to not send the hit. Okay, then we've got extra data. So we can use custom tasks to fire custom dimensions. So this is where we might be doing the client ID, hit type, payload length, and optimize custom dimensions such as what variation they're in, things like that. So we can find all of this out before it builds the hit and send it, and it doesn't slow it down. Then you've got for accuracy. So we want to improve accuracy, and the first way that I would recommend you do this is if you're finding that you've got high level of payload. So if you've tracked payload as a custom dimension, and now you see that you're reaching the threshold of the maximum allowed, and you might be missing some of those hits completely because they've got too big, you can use custom task to reduce it and take out the irrelevant parameters. You can also use it to stop duplicate transactions. So that's really, really useful because you don't want those overinflating your data. And then you have people further up the business saying, why doesn't it match? What's going on here? So it's really important to check for duplicate transactions and to stop that from happening. So custom tasks is really useful for that. You can also help implementation of your cross-domain. You can use regex for your auto-link domain list. You can also track offline browsing. So if somebody is browsing the site and then they lose the internet connection, it can store the cookies and it can then take them and send them when it then gets internet connection back. You can also use session cookies. So as in you can store them and you can use them for later. What am I? Where have I gone? You can look for when the session isn't active. That's the one. So you can ensure that the hits are sent after the session is inactive. You can send the hits as non-interactive so that they don't inflate your sessions. Obviously, this isn't necessary for everybody, but if you are seeing that the session times out after 30 minutes, but then another hit comes because you've got something automatically triggering, or you've got that sort of thing, you don't want your sessions to be overinflated, you don't want your session length to be longer, things like that. So it's good to think about that. It's only relevant in certain use cases, but it can be useful to think about, do you need to adapt that and stop your additional hits being counted as non-interactive if the session is over. You can also use the local storage for client ID. Now there's pros and cons to this, and there's different uses that may or may not be needed. And it could be a method for using for sort of some ITP staff, but it could be also, it's various things. So find out if you need it. It's there if you need it. And then, right, we've also got expansion. So how can we use custom tasks to expand our data? So we could be sending the data to an additional Google Analytics property. We could be, so that might be your legacy account. You might want to just duplicate it so that you've got the historical comparison. You might have one old account or classic that you might just want to keep just for disparity. Or you might be having, you might have a setup where you've got a global property, but also local roll-up properties. So you might be using your Google Analytics settings to look up if it's on the French domain, send this UA code so that it goes to your French property. But then you can use custom tasks to duplicate all of the hits and also send it to one. So it's a nice way to create a roll-up quite easily without having to use the premium functionality that rolls things up for you. You've also got the ability to duplicate it and obfuscate it. So this could be used if you want to gather data for a test, or to have in a sort of sample account that you can then share screenshots of and use in training material, for example, which doesn't show any client names, but does have much more data than you might have from the site that you run yourself. Or you could be also using GTM to send snowplow hits, or use it to send the Google Analytics information and match those up. So there's so much that you can use. And there's also things that's probably all on the custom task, but there's also some things, for further reading, excuse the poor layout here, but Google Tag Manager can also be used. Some of the things I didn't have time to mention, server-side tracking. So this could be useful, one for gathering data to send to BigQuery, for example, or it could be for potential options for getting around some of the ITP2 stuff. And then we've got That's also, there's some new functionality coming from Google Tag Manager. So that's going to help on the server side thing. It's going to be a new type of container. And so that's worth keeping an eye out for. Custom templates, if you're not already using them, they can be quite easy to import a template, put in your customizations, and it's got the tags and the variables that you need already. There's a gallery available for those. There's monitoring API coming, so you can just check that it's working properly. So there's lots always going on the GTM developments, and it's always worth keeping up to date on the knowledge, because there's far too much to put into 1 half hour, 40 minutes talk. So finally, you've got loads of ideas as to what data you could be sending and how you could use that. Let's have a look at the tools and how we know. So obviously GTM is the main tool here that we're talking about, but how do we add things like custom tasks? So Simo Ahava is one of the GTM legends. I mean, people overuse that term, but he is. So he's a developer who understands GTM and what you need from it. He's written some of the best guides that you can, and so many guides. So there's the custom task guide, and also, you know, when I said this code, you don't need to know this code, is because Simo's written it for you, and he's put it into a custom task builder. So it's really, really helpful to be able to go to that site, and you can choose, I would like to remove PII, add an additional hit, and do, you know, something else that you might want to. And then it builds all that JavaScript into one variable, because you can only have one custom task. So that means that all the code needs to be properly put together in one JavaScript thing. So use the custom task builder, and that really simplifies it. And yeah, make sure you understand the guide, and also follow Simo. If you're interested in GTM and you don't know who he is, shame on you. But now's the time to start following Simo. He's also just posted this morning, if anybody was worried about yesterday's Safari thing, he's cleared up the issue. Safari does not block cookies from Google Analytics. It does not block Google Analytics. So yeah, if you need the up-to-date data and information, Simo's there. Okay, next one, right, so GTM itself, you've got the preview tool. If you're not using this, then why are you here? No, I'm sure you will. So this tells you what's fired, what tags are fired, is really useful for debugging and understanding what is working and what's not. My favorite debugging tool is actually GA Debugger. It's simple, yet detailed. So it's not confusing, you don't have to do too much to get it. Just get this little plugin on your browser, open up your console, and you can then see all of the hits that are sent to Google Analytics. So these might not all be in your GTM preview, because there might be an inline script on the page. There might be some inline tracking. So you don't know, somebody might have, you know, snuck in some extra things. So this is really, really useful for understanding what actually is getting sent to Google Analytics, and is it coming out as you expect it to. So here's an example where we're looking for the GTM container ID. We're looking at the hit type. This is an event, so that's brilliant. Then we've got our category, action, and label. So we can just check, are we happy that the weather is clear skies and 27 degrees? I think that matches today perfectly. Normally it doesn't. So then you've got the location, so where are they, and the UA accounts. You want to make sure it's going to the correct place. You can see up here as well the dimensions and the client ID. So you can just make sure that, as well as being tracked as custom dimensions, they're coming across correctly here. So we've got a bit more information. So this information, one of them, we've got two different weather trackings going on. One is for custom dimensions, and we use a different one in the event tracking. So just check, is your data consistent? Is your product data accurate? Are the categories coming up correctly? Are there any sort of speech marks or apostrophes that have stopped your code from working? That can be a really critical one. Launch a new product that's got an apostrophe in the name, suddenly you've got no data on it. Well, not suddenly, but you know, from day one, you've got no data on it because you might not have escaped that character. So make sure that that's able to come through. Make sure that everything is working nicely by looking here. Tag Assistant is a little bit more of a maybe prettier way to have a look at it. But the key thing with this one as well is it allows you to record. So you can record your session And then you can go and have a look at the reports and see all of the tags that fired, what information went, and then you can go and have a look at what that looks like in Google Analytics as well. So it joins it all up and you can understand that. Now, that relies on you having access to that GA account, but you can use this without that functionality. You can use this on anybody's website. Likewise, GA Debugger you can use on anybody's website. So if you want to see what your competitors are tracking or what information or whether there's any personal information, you can use that. And then you can, understand a bit more about what's going on from, competitors, yourself, anything you didn't know was built, etc. So we think about the debugging questions when we're debugging. Firstly, do we trust it? Do all the hits that we expect to see show up? Are there any more? Do you have access to everything that's showing up and that's firing to all the same GA accounts that you have access to? What are they? What customizations have you got in place? And is the e-commerce data correct? Is all of the data correct? Are the customizations correct? And then getting more important, do I have the right data for the business KPIs? Can I easily make decisions from this data? And finally, how will this make me money? How can I use it to make myself money or the company? So is the data working for you? And that's one of the key things to always bear in mind when you're building your tags, when you're setting up your reports, when you're using GTM to harness all of that wonderful data that you can get. How are you best using it? If it's not working for you, I'd like to say hello, I can help. So we obviously help people fix their GTM implementations, build new ones, install new functionality, migrate, all sorts of things. So if you have felt overwhelmed by any of this and you don't trust your data, this is my shameless plug. Do get in touch and see if we can help you understand your data better and make more money from your website using GTM. Thank you very much.
Wow, thank you very much. Overwhelmed is an understatement. I ran out of note-taking. My God, I'm going to have to A, have a lie down, B, watch it again slower later on. Not because you spoke fast, but there's a hell of a lot of information in there. And I don't have time to ask a lot of detailed questions. Instantly, you flagged the kind of Safari thing I was going to bring up, but you kind of covered that off. But what went wrong there? Why was this suddenly this panic yesterday? Oh my God, Safari's not going to track anything. You know? What
so people misinterpreted the screenshot, and then also they published information that said, tracker will be blocked and things like that. When actually it's to do with blocking the or keeping an eye on the third-party cookies and the third-party information, whereas first-party is actually okay, and that's the one that Google Analytics uses. So it's trying to keep you safe. But obviously people panicked that their data would get lost and things like that, when actually, it doesn't. The data does still come through to Google Analytics. So there's no panic, there's no big drop coming.
Disaster averted. And just a broader question around GTM, around Tag Manager. I mean, I come across a lot of clients still that don't deploy it at all. What objections? I know, sad face. What objections have you currently heard about why they don't deploy GTM, and how do you often overcome those?
So predominantly, whatever the reason they come up with, it turns out that it's fear that obviously overrides this. So it's fear of the unknown. So we need to educate. It's fear of a lack of speed and it impacting the speed of the site. And again, that can be overcome. You can actually speed things up by putting everything into Google Tag Manager instead of having lots and lots of scripts on the page. So that's something that, it's one of those unfounded worries. You've also got just people thinking, oh, well, it could be dangerous because people could insert additional scripts into there and hack the site through there. So there's additional two-step verification for custom JavaScript tags that you can put in place. You can have a really strict admin process and user level. So you can put people at user level where they can edit things but not publish, and you've got approval queues and all sorts of things that you can use to make sure that it's as safe as possible. So hopefully those three things would get you sign off on implementing it.
And that makes a lot of sense. I don't have time for any more questions. We are literally out of time, but will you be hanging around during the day if people want to pose questions at you in the chat?
On and off, but it's probably best to just drop me a line on Twitter or email.
On those details.
Yeah. I've neglected some of the work I needed to do because I was putting this together and trying to, you know, not overdo it, but fit enough content in.
Hey, don't worry, that's been absolutely wonderful. Thank you very much again. And for anyone in the room now, we've got a break of about 20 minutes and we'll be restarting again at 12 for one session before lunch. You can dive into the session section over there or go for a bit of random networking or pop to the tavern. Thanks again, Anna. I'll see you later.
Thanks, Richard.
On.
Have a great day, everyone.